Hi, I'm here with Felicity Mulford, who is the research manager at the Center for Information Resilience. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your focus is on tech-facilitated gender-based violence. So just start really easy. What exactly is tech-facilitated gender-based violence, and why is it something that we should be talking about right now?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So tech-facilitated gender-based violence, or TFGBV for short, it's an umbrella term that covers a whole host of different gendered harms that are committed, assisted, amplified, or aggravated by technologies. Now, during workshops in Ethiopia, there was an interview participant who said to me something that really resonated. She said, "It's terrifying that no matter how many advancements we make, gender-based violence finds new ways to follow us." And I think that's really it, right? TFGBV is just a new iteration of an age-old problem. It's gender-based violence that's played out in this new arena. Now, it's really critical that we look at this now because we're seeing the rapid integration of technologies and we're seeing people flocking to social media platforms across the world. So we need to make sure that the progress we make in tech serves everybody, no matter their gender.
You recently led research on tech-facilitated gender-based violence and the U.S. election. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your big findings coming out of that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So our research looking into TFGBV in the context of the US election had a number of notable findings. So for starters, we found that tech-facilitated gender-based violence spans the gender and political spectrum. So women face a whole variety of different types of TFGBV, but this isn't just a women's issue. We found a significant amount of data showing that men experience a variation of TFGBV as well. But when we dug into that data a bit deeper, we could see that the dominant type of abuse they faced was emasculation. So references to weakness or femininity. And what that shows is that there's an underlying opinion that in some of these social media users that feminine traits are perhaps politically disqualifying. And that makes these individuals not manly enough for leadership.
That's wild. And did you see in any other demographic groups changes in kind of how that showed up and how people were impacted?
Yeah, we found that intersectional identities really compound the risk of TFGBV. So of the 5 candidates in our study that got the most TFGBV in their comment sections on their social media posts, 4 were Latinx. And we also found that the transgender community was significantly at risk of TFGBV in the dataset, despite no candidate in our study actually identifying as trans. 18% of all the gendered abuse we found targeted the trans community.
And based on that, do you see any potential implications or ramifications for democracy or representation at all?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things on democracy that are particularly interesting and important to share. So one thing that we found in the data is that the candidates and also their social media followers actually weaponized TFGBV against their rivals. So we saw both men and women across the political spectrum using gendered abuse against their opponents. Now, that's quite concerning to us because it actually undermines democratic values and participation if people feel like they're under attack. We also see that lots of people think TFGBV is just a personal thing, but it's not. We know it has societal implications. And that's not to diminish the personal impacts of it. When we interview women across different contexts about the experiences they face, we hear of psychological harm, stress, anxiety. We hear of physical harm, rape, sexual assault, physical assault. We hear of individuals fleeing their homes and also their countries due to threats on their lives. There are real significant personal risks. Mm-hmm. But the problem is all of this, it really shapes who feels comfortable to both speak, lead, and exist safely in these on and offline spaces. And we think that will have a real knock-on effect on democracy.
So you think there could be a potential that a lot of these groups that are, intersectional in particular, you flagged as an issue, but women generally, you could see them running less for office or being interested in politics and government in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing related is family members are not immune to this. We saw family members of candidates coming under significant fire. So gendered abuse targeting children, loved ones. And I think that, again, increases the cost of running for office because you then have to decide, okay, I want to run for office, but is it worth it for my family?
Wow. Yeah, that is definitely a challenging question. And I could see why it would prevent anyone from wanting to run. Now, obviously, your research has been focused in the U.S. context, but I know you have experience working in other contexts as well. Is this something that you see as a U.S. problem, or is it something that exists more broadly in political and government spaces?
I think our research across different contexts shows this is a global problem. It's not just the US. So at CIR, we've looked into gendered harms across a number of different contexts, from Afghanistan to Myanmar to Europe to the US and also Ethiopia. So I've had the pleasure of running a multi-year project in Ethiopia, which is a combination of research and community engagement. And despite the linguistic, social, political differences across all of those contexts I've just mentioned, we do see similarities. We see vulnerable groups being targeted with gendered abuse, whether that's young men and women, whether that's the LGBTQI plus community, whether that's those running for office or journalists and activists. Vulnerabilities are exacerbated. We see the abusers trying to silence, shame, ridicule, discredit these individuals in the public spaces. And we see individuals taking advantage of tech to perpetrate that harm. So an example of what I mean by taking advantage, in the context of Ethiopia, we see abusers hiding behind anonymous accounts or using coded speech to evade detection on social media. So you can see there's local dynamics that really shape the problem, but these problems are global. So we need both the global action and also those local solutions.
And what would you say some actions that you've seen kind of to counteract this have been kind of out of global context or also in the US political sense?
I think education is the first thing that I will always say to that. We see some fantastic work coming out on challenging masculinities and, existing beliefs around what being a woman is. And we think that's a really great place to start. Also identifying what this is to start with. Lots of people don't recognize some of these things as harms. So trying to have a bit of a narrative shift in that space to start with is something that I think is the best course of action.
So obviously we're here talking about the elimination of violence against women. So what is one takeaway that you have for viewers of this broadcast?
So TFGBV itself is a really fixable problem. And I think we really need to bring together stakeholders from across different sectors to discuss the issue and understand how we can find solutions. For example, like I mentioned, upstream protections through education or protections for users of tech like digital security, or even just sitting down with the tech developers to say, how can we develop this tech with gendered harms in mind? Mm-hmm. And then I also think we need to make sure we do some more research, that we have ample evidence to help support all of those areas of advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time.